Hi, my name is Aadya Nair of the Youth Advisory Board, the Children's Science Center Lab. I am a longtime volunteer and a senior at South Lakes High School, and I'm here today to introduce you to Gretchen Gillis, who has joined us for our STEM Champion video series. Gretchen Gillis is a senior geological consultant at Aramco Americas in Houston and the 2021 to 2022 president of American Association of Petroleum Geologists. At Aramco Americas, Ms. Gillis supports oil and gas exploration and production and provides training in petroleum geoscience and scientific writing for Saudi Aramco. Gretchen earned a BA degree in geology from Bryn Mawr College, Pennsylvania, and an MA degree in geological sciences from the University of Texas at Austin. The STEM Champion video series highlights the diverse STEM community and the journey STEM champions have taken, allowing children and young adults to see what is achievable. During our conversation, Ms. Gillis will discuss her background and her career, as well as insights on the future of the geosciences industry. Welcome, Ms. Gillis.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Before we start to discuss about your journey that brought you here to where you are today, I would like to know more about your current role at Aramco Americas in Houston. Can you please describe your responsibilities as a senior geological consultant?
Yes, well, first I should say that this really is my dream job because Aramco is a fascinating company and it is responsible for stewarding some of the most amazing resources in the world. So as a geologist, working in really remarkable geological accumulations is such a fascinating job. But I would say on a day-to-day basis, I have a really interesting variety of responsibilities. My primary role is to support the people in Saudi Aramco who are working in exploration and production. So sometimes that means helping with analysis of data. Sometimes that means making connections between people so that, for example, if there are specialized laboratory services that we need for analysis, we get those. I also look for new technology in the Western Hemisphere that can be applied effectively in Saudi Arabia. And then you mentioned teaching, which is one of the things I really enjoy because part of my responsibility is making sure that our new hires in engineering and geophysics have a good basic understanding of petroleum geology. And many of them have taken a geology course at their university program, but making sure everyone has a common baseline for the petroleum geology of Saudi Arabia is important. And then the teaching scientific writing is kind of a bonus. It's one of the things I love doing because it helps me learn about what other people are doing, but it also helps me share my interest in communicating effectively, which I think is a really undervalued skill.
Mm-hmm.
So on any given day, I sometimes walk in the building and I don't know who I'm going to see or what's going to happen. There are often a lot of happy surprises, but it's always interesting, which I think is a really important career motivator for me. I'm always learning, always challenged.
Yeah, you don't want to be stuck in a job that you can't like see yourself in 20 years from now. So that's good. That's really nice.
Yeah, I think some people enjoy a job where every day is similar and it's, you know, it's comforting, but for me, it's the excitement of what next is always pretty motivating.
I love that. That's so cool. All right. My next question for you is, what inspired you to pursue degrees in the geological field? Did you know from a young age, or was there a pivotal event or experience that helped you select your future career?
I think in terms of selecting my future career, I owe a lot to my family. My father was a chemical engineer who worked in refining and liquefied natural gas throughout his career. And my mother was an English teacher. So I feel like what I'm doing now is the best of both worlds. But my father's job in particular offered us the opportunity to travel to a few places that were really wonderful and eye-opening. One being Algeria and another being Indonesia. We also had some brief times in the Middle East. But I think that exposure to people around the world made me naturally curious. And geology involves seeing things all over the world, you know, having a sense of what the whole planet is like. So as a kid, I enjoyed the travel. I was not outdoorsy or athletic. I didn't go hiking. I didn't collect rocks or fossils. but I had this interest in seeing a lot, I think. And then when it was time to go to college, one of my older sisters recommended that I take a geology course because she took one as her science requirement and thought it was interesting. And so when I got to Bryn Mawr, I immediately investigated what the geology program was like. And it turns out that for a small department, it's really wonderful in terms of quality and a rigorous curriculum. And so I was hooked pretty much from the start.
I love that. I feel like for a lot of kids nowadays, it's hard to keep an open mindset, which is why they can't really find out which subject they're really passionate about. Like for me personally, like I always feel like, wow, I really want to do something where I feel like really connected to the subject, but I always feel like there's something holding me back. Maybe I don't know if it's like academic pressure right now, but traveling really helps with that. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing. For me, geology is hard, and it's not something that comes naturally. Whereas in high school, music and languages were things that were pretty easy for me. And I
Mhm.
think I just realized that without a greater challenge, I wouldn't have that strong interest or passion in what I was doing.
Yeah, I feel that. Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah. Uh, oh, also, you are the current president of the American Association of Petroleum Geologists. Could you please explain the benefits of joining professional associations and scientific societies and why you decided to join in 1990, right after completing your master's degree?
Well, AAPG is a really important association in my field because it is the premier organization for geologists who explore for and produce petroleum. And it is important in terms of scientific development. It's important for networking. It's important for understanding professional ethics and so on. Um, and for me, my exposure to AAPG began as an undergraduate, just reading scientific papers in the AAPG bulletin. But as a professional, pretty much from the time I joined, I was relying on AAPG for training courses, for meeting people who could mentor me because my company did not have a formal training program. And so pretty much from the outset, I was relying on AAPG. But then along the way, as I became a volunteer, I was able to build career skills. And one of the advantages of professional associations and scientific societies is that as a volunteer, you can build skills that and try things out that may not be safe to do in your paid employment.
Mhm.
So for me specifically, AAPG helped me build some leadership skills. It vastly improved my communication skills. It built a solid professional network that has helped me get to my dream job. And I've also made the most incredible friends and mentors along the way. I mean, just the most wonderful scientists who do really cool stuff, and they're so smart and so accomplished, but they still put their pants on one leg at a time. You know, we're good friends, and so that's been a really important thing. But I've also joined a number of other associations for different reasons at different times. So I actually belong to the Society of Exploration Geophysicists because that's a closely related field. The Society of Petroleum Engineers because they have a great literature database that I often look to for how technology is applied in the energy industry. The Association of Earth Science Editors, which is a really small group, but they're very passionate about communicating earth science. And I have, there's kind of an embarrassing number of memberships, but they all serve a purpose.
I think it's really interesting to see how like you're a part of so many societies like this. And I feel like a lot of high school students in particular, they always feel like we only have these in high school, like honor societies and stuff like that, but they don't see how they could help that in how they could that could help them in the future, which is really interesting because like I love how you're a part of so many organizations. That must help you in so many ways.
Yes, and let me add a plug. Many of these groups provide free membership for students if you're in a university, and so it's worthwhile to check them out while there's no cost to it, because then you can kind of see which ones align with your interests. And some of them have the most fantastic educational programs. And I'm going to say that AAPG has a really great one, an exploration team competition. SEG has Challenge Bowl, which is sort of like a game show, but they also have Evolve, which is like a virtual internship. And SPE has its own student program. So it really is worth looking for these things because these are recognized by employers as being rigorous programs. And so if you participate, that's great. And if you're actually a winner, that also gets you recognition.
That's great. Thank you. All right. So I read about your passion for mentoring students and young professionals and advancing women and others who are underrepresented in the field. Can you tell me about your work in these areas, please?
Yes, that's one of my happy things. I would say that the geosciences in the US have long been considered the least diverse science. And when I started my career as a geoscientist many years ago, I thought, okay, in 10 years, it's going to be fine. And sadly, 10 years later, the numbers of women in my companies were about the same. And there are sociologists who are studying what's going on and so on. But I think one of the things that's important is having a supportive community, having a network of women. And so AAPG has a women's network, SEG has a women's network, SPE has a diversity committee. I think all of these are important to make people feel valued and welcome. But I think, in the recruiting stages, it's important to make sure that people are given good consideration. And really then if they're hired, supported, with people who understand the challenges of being the unicorn in the room, let's say. Um, I would say that one of the things that I do see progress in is that people are willing to discuss these issues. And so the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, has been important to opening the discussion. I think the Me Too movement has been important. There are a couple of final frontiers in geoscience that we are gradually approaching. One is sometimes there are really adamant opinions that people with physical disabilities who can't go in the field really can't be geologists. And I disagree with that because I think there are lab-based geoscientists who do wonderful things. And we have to get past that. I would say, I don't know if calling it macho is appropriate, but that attitude that if you're not out there in the field climbing mountains, you can't be a geologist. I think we need to put that to rest. And then another area is mental health. And this is still, we're moving gently because mental health issues are so stigmatized. But there have been some recent publications about, for example, the stresses that come from being in the field. People get depressed because it can be lonely, it can be isolating, it's really difficult. And I think opening those conversations is really healthy. But I think also just making sure that people understand geoscience is a terrific field. It's really interesting, and people come at it from all different backgrounds. So you don't have to be some, mountain climbing dude to be effective in the field.
Before we move on to the next question, do you mind talking about how you stop yourself from letting the depression to getting to you? How is it that you don't feel so lonely and that you don't fall into that trap?
Well, okay. So I mentioned that part of my attraction to geology was that I didn't, it wasn't easy. And I would say when I did my field work for my master's degree, that was difficult because I was out in the field in Central Texas by myself on a lot of hot summer days. And for safety reasons, I would never do that again. You should always go with someone. But it was hard because I just felt like, okay, am I seeing this correctly? Have I measured enough Was that sample really oriented properly? And it filled me with so many doubts.
Mhm.
And I realized, like, okay, I probably don't want to try to get a job as a field geologist, a surface geological mapper, because it's not something that is making me feel happy and confident and successful. Now I, got my work done, um, but I would say I do need to be around people. And so working in exploration teams and other types of teams through my career has really um, helped me and made me feel like I'm contributing and enjoying the company of other people.
I'm glad to hear that. How do you anticipate and or foresee changes in the energy and geoscience industry? What excites you about the future of your industry and what concerns you as well?
That's a fantastic question. So you may hear people talking about the energy transition that we're in, and we are in it, and we're seeing all kinds of exciting things happen in terms of technology and trying to always do better into the future. I would say I temper that with concern that a lot of people don't understand that the energy transition is a transition. It's not an on-off switch. It's going to be a gradual progression. So to take one example, electric cars.
Mhm.
You see more of them on the streets, but the number of electric cars in our fleet is a very small number. And it's going to take a while before the fleet is fully electric, if that's where we decide to go. But to make that happen, electric cars require a huge number of what are known as critical minerals. These minerals come from a handful of places, and a lot of the processing is done in even fewer places to get minerals of the purity to create, for example, the batteries. Um, we could do some of that in the United States, but a lot of people don't want to see more mining. So there are going to be trade-offs and compromises. Much like sometimes people don't want to have a nuclear power plant in their backyard, they may also say, well, I don't want a wind turbine either.
Mhm.
And so we have to, I think, as communities, as citizens, make some plans so that the energy transition will happen thoughtfully rather than by shock. And I think, right now we are going to be shocked at times because part of what is going to make the energy transition happen is oil and natural gas as transportation fuels and backup fuels, and we will need them for a while. We'll also need them for products like medical tubing and stuff like that, which I don't know that we have any replacements for. And so I think working on this cooperatively is going to be essential. And there's often a temptation to demonize the oil and gas industry without really appreciating what it has done.
Mhm.
And I think an important piece of the energy transition is that there are still more than 1 billion people on Earth who do not have access to energy the way we in the West do. And so, there's an important conversation there around who gets to decide. So I think it's exciting times. I think there's room for huge amounts of innovation to make cleaner energy sources and to do everything in a more environmentally responsible and effective way. So we need lots of engineers and scientists to help us make that happen. Because energy, from the second I wake up, I look at my alarm clock, which is powered by electricity, and then I check my phone, which has a battery in it and plugs into the wall. There's energy at every stage of the day, and it's still early.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I feel that, especially nowadays with instant gratification, people expect that to be applicable in every single field, and that's not how it works. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. You mentioned that geology continuously challenged you and forced you to learn. What advice do you have for future generations that would encourage them to take up the challenge and explore rather than losing interest in pursuing something easier?
Well, For me, kind of the intellectual challenge, the fascination is sort of my fuel. I think for some people, finding a balance between something that is challenging enough without being overwhelming is important. And as you go through your career, university, graduate school, working in a job, whatever it is that you're doing, there are other pressures in life. Many people get married, have children, and so balancing out all these things is a challenge. And so some people really thrive on 4 hours of sleep and running all day, and that's terrific. But there are other people who have to be a little more deliberate about the limits of their, let's say, their natural energy and so on. And so, I think there are such a wide range of opportunities. I mean, as a scientist, you can work in industry as I do, which has the advantage of you tend to go into the office, you work your day, and okay, often I take work home, but you don't necessarily have to. I know people who work in research organizations, and they work incredibly hard. Even when they're not working, their minds are working on it. And I think those people have a special capacity to really have their brains moving all the time. I need to kind of shut down, read a newspaper, watch a murder mystery on TV. So, I need to do something different to kind of clear my head for the next day. But I think I sort of think that our university years help us understand where we want to go.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely look forward to that college experience. All right. Before we end this conversation, do you have any additional advice for the younger generations regarding how they should pursue their passions?
Yeah, I think when you do something that you love, it is cliche, but it doesn't feel like work. And I would have to say that many of my years in industry have not felt like work because I've been doing things that I love. And I hope you and your colleagues are so fortunate. I will say, specific to geoscience, that so many of the challenges that we face have their roots in geology. So natural hazards, water, minerals, energy, the environment, the atmosphere. So many of these things lead directly into geoscience. And sometimes the career paths are not obvious. So I'll throw out one that I wasn't aware of until recently, which is that the insurance industry needs geoscientists to understand things like flood hazards and landslide hazards and earthquake hazards. And I didn't realize that they actually employ people full-time as geologists to look at that stuff. I think that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. So do look at geoscience, and it's a great combination of physics, chemistry, biology, math. It brings everything together, mm-hmm. but it also fundamentally helps you understand this wonderful place where we live and how valuable it is. And I think I'd like to give a special plug for people to study geoscience because it's just wonderful. But anytime you can find your passion, that's a great thing too.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Ms. Gillis, and sharing your background and your journey and other interesting aspects of the geoscience industry with us today. Thank you so much.
It's been a real privilege and a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.